Sure. Yeah. Why don't we see who's on?
Okay. There might be more folks joining us, but maybe we can just get started and go from there. Okay. So I'll hover over names, and if you're here, say hi. I don't know if I saw Ryan. There he is.
John's here.
Morning, John. Is Matthew here? I'm just getting the second page of people, so it's kind of hard to see who's on and not. I don't think I've seen Candace or Kevin. Good morning.
Kevin Crossan is here. Thank you.
Mike. Jennifer, here.
I'm here.
Good morning. Kenya. I saw Jimmy.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. Chris. Tim.
Hello again.
Alex. Alicia.
Hello, everyone.
Lucian. I don't see Lucian or Steph. Jackson. And of course, I see Ian.
Hey, I'll be very quiet for once in my life because I have 5 children running around. So,
Well, good morning. Okay, I'll get this up. So on the agenda today, we'll approve the minutes, a little bit of a schedule update, an LRT systems overview, and if you look at our agenda, we actually pulled some of the business information down into the anti-displacement working group piece. So Sam will cover that when we get to that part. So if it feels like we skipped over it, it is still there. So with that, chairs, if we could ask for any comments on the minutes.
If no one has comments, can I get a motion to approve? Please.
This is Alicia. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposition, same sign, please. Okay, motions are approved.
If you're all ready, Dan and I will cover a little bit about what to expect schedule-wise in the coming kind of summer.
Thanks, Sophia, and good morning, everybody. Happy to be here today. I'm going to start today just talking a little bit about what we're gonna do over the next number of months as we continue to kind of explore what this alignment can be and what some of the benefits and pros are and what some of the issues and challenges will be. The part that I'm going to talk a little bit about are these. You've seen this slide before, and it's one that we kind of base this continued year off of. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these top 2 boxes, about what we're going to be doing with project goals and what we're going to do with some of the design and engineering aspects the project, and Sam's going to talk a little bit later today about the anti-displacement working group and some of the areas down in the bottom two boxes as well. So going forward from there, this next slide kind of shows where we are today and what we hope to accomplish. So over on the far left is where we were at the end of 2020 as we kind of got this project back rolling, and on the far right gets us to the point toward the end of the year where we've got and hopefully have a recommended route alternative to move forward through the environmental impact process. And we're kind of about right in the middle right now. We've released the initial routes. We're starting to have and continue to get some public engagement about people's thoughts about the routes and where they are. And now we're moving kind of into a little more of an evaluation piece of those various routes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means from the engineering side. Sophia's going to talk a little bit about what that means from the engagement side and some of the upcoming events that we'll be working on as we kind of look at and more further evaluate the some of the technical aspects and some of the spatial aspects of moving these routes forward. So out since we're going to continue to have our survey and our interactive map open until May 28th now. We've extended that time frame, right, Sophia? I think we were talking about closing that at the end of April, but obviously April was a very challenging month, primarily in all of our communities, and especially in Hennepin County and throughout the Bottineau corridor. So because of that, because of the cohort, our engagement cohort said, boy, they'd like to have some initial time. We've kind of extended the time frame when people can, put some comments together on the survey or on the interactive map. We're doing a bunch of things right now to kind of move that forward. So we're also kind of pulling together collaboratively what needs to be part of our final report here as we move this process forward. So that's really where we are as we move forward.
This is Mike Steinhauser. Can you share early on comments of the survey, or do you just get that all at once?
So Sophia has some, and I think Sophia, I don't know if you have a slide in here, but I think Sophia she has a lot of that. We've used a slide that I've seen before, Sophia, that's got some of our early reviews, Mike, if you will, some of our early information, what we've heard. And I don't know if Sophia can pull that off the top of her head, but we do have that. Yeah, we do not need to wait. No, we can start to roll some of that out. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And so, Sophia, I take it you can build that in?
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit, and we shared some of it at our last meeting, and at our next meeting, which Dan will get into, we'll kind of have almost a full report of what we've heard. I would say, as we've gone through the couple months, there's been common themes, and they've been more reinforced through the process. So you're hearing some of the similar questions, some of the similar themes. So it gives us a place to kind of make sure we're hitting on those topics and building on them and responding to them. And so I'll get into it a little bit more, but just wanted to lay that foundation as we start to go through everything.
So here's a little bit of where we believe we'll be in June, July, and August over the summer months as we start to bring this forward. And these are the things we hope to bring to the advisory committees for discussion. So in June, we're really working hard right now to create some visualizations that shows, from a spatial standpoint, how LRT could look and fit along the various routes, beginning downtown, coming up West Broadway, coming up Washington, coming up Lowry, coming up Highway 81 in Robbinsdale, coming up Highway 81 in Crystal. So we're working on a methodology that puts an aerial photo as a first identifier that shows kind of the cross section in various spots along the route, shows where the businesses are, shows the sidewalks, shows the roadway width, shows the driving lanes, where there's parking, those kind of things. And it shows it with dimensions. And then it lays next to that alternatives of plugging, if you will, LRT into that cross section. We've heard a lot about aerial overhead LRT, so we're going to do some with LRT at grade. We're going to do some visualizations with LRT elevated. We're going to pick various changes along the routes and put that on there, and then folks will see, okay, so if LRT is there, what changes from the way it is today? Is parking there? Is parking gone? Is it one lane in each direction? Is it still 2 lanes in each direction? Is the sidewalk configuration wider, narrower? How does it relate to businesses and those kind of pieces? And so we're going to do that in a bunch of spots. We'll bring that forward. We'll provide that to the committees. We'll review those. We'll come up with, do we need to look at anything else? What if we moved it to the side? What if we stayed in the center? We can go through those pieces and talk about the pros, the cons. What do we lose? What do we keep? What makes sense? And so that's part of what we'll do in June. Other thing we'll do in June is we will start to bring forward recommendations and then have discussions about evaluating criteria. And this will primarily be if we're talking about some quantitative and qualitative evaluation criteria for Washington, Lowry, West Broadway, how those routes somewhat compare, and then talk about our community feedback as well. That's what we hope to do in June. In July, we hope to now advance that work from June to actually have, based on feedback about, what we see in some of the visualizations, to have a real walkthrough along the various routes and start to provide some definitive details about how the travel lanes would end up being able to be configured. What are the sidewalks like? Where are the crossings? What are the potential right-of-way impacts? Where will we need to potentially buy some right-of-way in order to fit in a station and those kind of pieces? And then really, ideally, a July meeting, and I don't know how the world will work in July, but ideally a July meeting would be the kind where we'd be in person over a long table with a long routes and layouts there and walking through it step by step. We may have to learn how to do that electronically, but that's part of what we would hope to do then in July to get a much better feel for how these pieces work together. Go ahead, Jason, or Sophia. And then in August, then we want to continue discussion about engineering details and then really start to build on how we start to pull our draft report together so that in September we can start to have some recommendations for a draft report pulled together. So it's a fairly aggressive schedule, and we may need to build some additional meetings in, but it's really now on the engineering side, it's now time to not look at a map with the lines, but start to actually expand that and put LRT sections onto drawings and start to advance that discussion about actual impacts and actual benefits. Also built into this work will be where are the best spots for stations and how do we kind of plug station areas in to these various routes, and not only station areas and where, but also station configurations as well. How do we configure the station so that they provide the best fit?
Hey, I have a question for clarification with the visualizations that you're creating on the aerial view. It sounded like you mentioned some of the properties that I think what you said was we would lose. I'm just as a clarifying point, I'm wondering if the plan is from an aerial view to show the potentially impacted properties from bottlenecks and things of that nature with the system. Is that the plan, or will that come later as the details come in with exactly the stops and all of that jazz?
I think it could very well be a little bit of both. The visualizations will be much more generalized. I mean, we won't have a cross-section visualization for every 100 feet along the alignment, but we'll find where some of the pinch points are, and we'll see where some of the challenges are. We may not fully need to acquire any specific buildings themselves. We don't know that yet, but we may in some very, very tight spots, and so we'll see some of that. But then, really, when we get to that July timeframe and we take some cross-section visualizations and then lay that down on a two-dimensional drawing, then we'll really be able to see where the real challenges are, and much better be able to identify again. And these are all potential impacts, right? Because this is the starting point, and then we start to modify the design accordingly in order to see how we minimize right-of-way acquisition as well. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll get a bit of a look at the first part, but we won't quite know everything. Then when we lay it down two-dimensionally, we'll have the whole alignment through there.
Yeah, and I guess where I was wanting to go with that is that I think that it'll be helpful and informative to community conversations when we talk about, whether it goes down West Broadway or Lowry, or what are the impacts from a property perspective, how many people are being displaced. I think that obviously, again, it's conceptual, it's a moving target, but I think the more transparency that we can have
absolutely
with to be able to make informed decisions, I think that would be at least a critical indicator, at least from my personal point of view.
And thanks for that, because that also brings up kind of the other piece that you saw in the July timeframe, which was to work on starting in June, discussion of project evaluation criteria. And so likely that is, there's a great example of that's an evaluation criteria. X route displaces X number of buildings, Y route displaces Y number of buildings, and is the lesser the better? Are there some properties, which ones have more property impacts than the others? And so that's correct. And as Felicia just wrote in the chat, there are some businesses in many of these. And so there you're not only talking about potentially relocating a building that may be vacant or may be, we know we have some tax forfeit pieces in that, but in many of them there are businesses. And so keeping those separate as well, because the more businesses we would end up relocating, the more negative that particular route might be. And so we would try to minimize that completely.
Dan, if I may, if only because I've been in some of the other conversations where we were talking about how you all, engineers, and you all would actually be working with some designers, engineers, and architects in some of the communities. I know specifically in North Minneapolis, we have a lot of, some are on this call, different folks who have some of that professional and experience insight around like design as well, where, again, we've had this conversation before, but I feel like it might be helpful to talk a little bit about how we're wanting to move forward in that process, so people understand that it's not just Met Council engineers kind of figuring that piece out. Also with the visuals, that those visuals are also coming from groups like Juxtaposition Arts and folks in the Engagement Cohort that are helping create things that are a bit more digestible for folks to engage with.
That, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And so as we work with various community groups, you are right. Juxta has pulled some things together. We're working with any and various developers along the route as well, and or other business owners, to find out what are long range plans and short range plans that people have. Where will there be changes along West Broadway and Lowry, and how do we build some of those pieces into our visualizations as well. So
And I would say too, these pieces that our engineering team are putting together are good starting pieces for conversations to have a collaborative process in terms of engagement with the community and tapping into some of these expertise. Just because, you know, we can bring forth the details of kind of some of the operating pieces of the LRT and kind of do that, a little bit of that, like, these are the things that are possible, and actually have a system that runs, and then tap into the expertise of these community folks to really get feedback and work through some of these questions, and show that in ways that really bring people in. And so I think we're really looking forward to these collaborative processes with the partners that you've identified.
And of course, Sophia, we know that many of you, or all of you, know much more about what's going on than we may. And so again, when we put together some of the visualizations, even in Robbinsdale and along West Broadway, and those that they can, Kenya talks about areas of opportunity, and kind of how you may guide us to say, hey, you could shift this a little bit here, that could change the opportunity on this particular block, and we could do some things different. So we'll start with a guide, and we'll try to center things, and we'll of course always try to minimize impacts, but there may be some areas where more impact on one side provides more opportunity on the other. Ian also identifies real estate developers. Which ones have we spoken with so far? Obviously, Ian, one is our work with you, as we did that, and the other one that I know of is that we haven't really, I haven't really visited with the developer, but I've had and took a look at the plan, is on the West Broadway curve there, where I think is it Sherman?
George Sherman.
That's doing that development. We've got that plan as well, even though that plan is not yet under construction. We have that plan and how that fits in there. So that's also part of what we need to do as we start to pull those together. So that's what we're going to do from an engineering standpoint. Now as we move forward, Sophia's going to talk a little bit about how we, kind of plug in the various community inputs to this, how this information gets shaped not only by our committees like yourselves and the Community Advisory Committee, but by our community engagement cohort as well.
Thanks, Dan. And first, I want to say, as soon as we start getting feedback, from day one, we start bringing that into the project. And so, we might have a survey open till May 28th, but that doesn't mean that we're not pulling out some of the main pieces and starting to talk to our project team about it in preparation. And kind of what I'm going to go through too is we want people to have time to digest the information, but also we're pushing out a lot. So what I'm you'll kind of see a theme with what we're doing today is that the advisory committees often kind of get, to steal Sam's analogy, the first bite of the apple, but we need to take multiple bites of the conversation. And kind of what Dan walked through is, we really heard from the past process of when we released the routes that people wanted to have a very collaborative process. So what we're trying to do kind of through what Dan just talked about is kind of show everybody these main components so that when we get to the route release report, everybody has had input in shaping kind of the main pieces of it. And so our engagement is also intended to kind of reflect that process, and I'll highlight that a little bit. So right now, we still have the survey open, but that doesn't mean that we're not talking about if we've heard much about missing routes and think, did we get this right, kind of thing. We've heard a little bit, and we'll have to bring that forward and respond to it. We've heard a lot about potential station locations. I think it's been fairly easy to crystallize, for example, the responses around Robbinsdale of where stations should potentially go and serve, not necessarily the block by block placements, but just kind of general, bubble station areas. Minneapolis, we're going to get into that a little bit more. I think we're getting a lot of good feedback, and that is what we'll pull forward. We've been also hearing, specific issues and opportunities and things that people need, and we're pulling that forward, as well as if everybody can remember, like multiple months ago, when we had that first conversation about the project goals, people have been responding to them as well. And I think we've gotten, I think, what I would say, pulling from the survey of people responding to them, as well as, these bodies, these are advisory committees, is that we're getting kind of like the thumbs up with the initial goal. And a lot of the goals, a lot of the additional feedback is on kind of, how you would bolster them or how you would kind of modify them, which then really helps for our next conversation about having like that full set of project evaluation criteria. Going back a step, we've been out and about in May, and I would be remiss not to recognize the events and the contributions, both of the cohort, but also our advisory committee members, and really shaping it. And I just wanted to highlight a few events that we've done in addition to just kind of being out and about at vaccination sites. There were some Earth Day events in the community. I really want to thank Felicia for hosting us at the Northside Business Luncheon. That was, I think the whole project team thought that was a really awesome event to attend, and in all of the presenters as well that we got to hear from was very valuable. So we just really want to say thank you for that. Our community advisory committee also hosted us at the Seeds to Harvest group, and we had an event in Robbinsdale. And so just wanted to thank the committees for really being very active in this. It really helps us with our engagement. This list is going to get a lot longer, but I just want to also recognize Tim, kind of have a Chambers event coming up, as well as other events from the cohort that we'll have in May. And this list is going to get long. We just wanted to highlight a few that are kind of in the way, or in the way. You know what I mean? So to give kind of a view of summer and what we have kind of going up. So all over this summer, we are going to attend community events. We need to do some pop-ups. So, going to Hy-Vee, going to Cub, going to some of our bus stations, and just being there as people are walking out. We need to ask for permission and get there. And I know the cohort has plans for that as well. So we'll be tapping into some of that, but really being where people are. And then attending ongoing community-specific events. So these are two things that we need to plug in through our whole summer. And then just to give a little bit of ideas, we've had a few conversations in our committees about the anti-displacement group. So we got kind of a preview last month. We're going to talk about it again this month, and next month Sam will present on that later. But we need to kind of let folks know out in the world that we're doing this work, that we're thinking about it, because we haven't necessarily pushed that out a lot. So Sam will go into this more, but having some broader engagement that can help with this process starting in June. And then in July, we're going to have two really awesome pieces of information that Dan kind of started to walk through, is kind of our visuals and some of the role plots itself. And so kind of ramping up for another, heavy engagement around those two pieces. So having a whole bunch of tools for people to kind of comment on both those items with and be collaborative about, but also really July and August, as we'll want to talk to people that are actually seeing their location on a map, and wondering about it. And so we're going to save a lot of staff capacity to really have those, I call them neighborhood adjacent or corridor adjacent neighbors. So you're right up on our project. Let's actually talk specific details now, and that'll help also feed into our report. So July and August, we'll really be focusing on the products that you are seeing in June and July, and finding places where we can roll out those roll plots, and people can come and see and talk with us, thinking of park events or other things. We'll figure it out. It's an evolving process, but really making sure we have those spaces. Before I move on, is that just want to recognize that the cohort has been doing a ton of work, and we work with a whole bunch of folks, but these folks are in the weeds with us on a very detailed basis. And Joan put together a slide just sharing a little bit of what we've been hearing specifically from the cohort and how we've been pulling it through. So I'll just touch on that real quick before we kind of get into the next topic. But we heard the cohort really helped us confirm that we needed to give this first part of engagement more time. Communities needed space to focus on other things. We started April with attacks on our Asian community, and then had trials and a whole bunch of other things. So really, our project exists in a world that's complicated, and staff want to be responsive to that. We're furiously trying to translate materials, and I think on our end we've gotten a better system of how we can get materials translated faster, and so that's an ongoing part of our process. And kind of how everything fits together. This is a complicated project with a lot of different committees and who does what and what this all is. Just kind of continuing to paint the bigger picture so people can follow along, and also recognizing that we have parts of the project that people have been working on for a long time, and so not forgetting that. And we're all coming from different places. Some folks have a lot of project knowledge, where some folks are diving in for the first time, and so just kind of recognizing that whole stream of things. And anti-displacement work is obviously still something that everybody cares about deeply, and we'll talk about that later today. So that was a really, really fast kind of overview, but I hope that gives folks a flavor of what we're planning and what we're hoping to try to engage with and accomplish over the summer. If there's any questions for me or Dan, we're happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Nick to kind of ground us in the system.
Okay, well, I'll get started. Good morning, everybody here, and just wanted to just talk a little bit about our existing LRT system, talk about some of the elements that are in it. I know some folks are newer to the project, or even to LRT, so there's some stuff that in here that may help understand things a little bit better. And there's a lot of folks that probably maybe even ride LRT, but you're just familiar with maybe the station platforms that you get on and off of, and the inside of the train, or maybe looking out the window as you're going past pretty quickly. But these are some higher level things just to kind of get everybody grounded a little bit more, and even have some discussions on certain elements on the system we're in. We make a lot of assumptions because a lot of the staff here has been working on LRT projects for maybe 10 plus or more years, but there's a lot of folks on this call that maybe even have been involved in LRT for more longer than that. So in discussions. Great place to start here is with our existing metro system map. This is the map of our high frequency routes, the LRTs, the BRTs. It has both existing alignments and proposed alignments. So on this map, you can kind of start seeing how the backbone of our transit system is being built out here. We have the existing blue lines coming from the south through this area. We have the existing green line in place, but then we also show some of the proposed. This is just LRT proposed lines, like Southwest being built down to the southwest, and the proposed blue line on here too, in the hatch blue and green for both the Southwest. We also show some of the BRT routes in here, so you can see how they coordinate with with the light rail transit that, well, we do have all the BRTs on here. So we have the Penn Avenue, the C lines, the D line, which is going into construction, the gold line that's under construction, red line is in place. So as you start seeing this map filled out, you can see how a system is being put into place for those frequent, reliable, more permanent routes in here. I want to talk a little bit about modes too, because in the conversations we've had in the last few months, I get a lot of questions about why we don't do things like North Star, or talk about elements that are maybe more heavy rail related. So North Star we have in place is existing commuter rail, and with the commuter rail, those are for commuters more during those commute times in the morning and the afternoon is when it runs. It does run on an existing freight railroad. It shares tracks with the BNSF that it runs along. Station spacing on that is usually about 2 to 5 miles. So farther apart, longer between stops. Light rail, which we're talking about right now, this project is identified as a light rail project. So station spacing on a light rail project is every maybe half mile in the downtown areas to, as we get farther out, spreads out to a mile. But I guess typically I use that 3/4 mile spacing is what we're looking at for efficient running and serving customers. The guideway that it's on, the running type is a guideway that's dedicated to light rail. It's shared in a few spots in our system. Actually, just one spot that I know of where shares with buses, that would be at the U of M in the Transitway. And the examples are existing green and blue line that are in place, and then green line going under construction. Now, there's a lot of talk about streetcars. Streetcars could share rails, the guideway with LRT, but typically they're street running, so they do share their guideway with mixed traffic. So in the picture you see here, it's running through an existing street and sharing that roadway with traffic, automobile traffic, and station spacing on a streetcar is a little bit closer together. It's more for those higher density areas, that 1/4 mile to half mile spacing. An example of that is the Riverview line that they're reviewing right now or planning at this point. Some of the other questions are like heavy rail, and this would be more like the Chicago L or the New York subway. It can have station spacing in the urban areas of half mile, but as you get farther out, they'll space it out accordingly to the stops. 1 mile to 5 miles. The guideway on this is exclusively dedicated. It wouldn't be in mixed traffic. Those trains, for instance, a lot of them have a third rail on them that is electrified, so you don't want to other components or folks out on those tracks. Other thing about heavy rail is unlike a light rail, which is designed and sized to fit within a city block. So we can run 3-car consists in our system, and those 3-car consists are about 270 feet, so they fit within a city block. So when we have a station, that station fits within the block, and we're not bleeding over to either sides of and blocking multiple intersections as we're stopped at a station. Heavy rail, on the other hand, can have multiple trains. I think 400 feet long. So a lot of times that's why they're elevated out of the system, so they're not blocking up multiple blocks at stations and whatnot. Next slide, please. Here's some of the operating assumptions that we have on light rail. So this line is designed, the blue line extension is extension of the existing blue line. We're connecting to Brooklyn Park, Crystal, Robbinsdale, Midday, Minneapolis. But as it goes south through Minneapolis, all the way down to Bloomington through the airport, 2 airport stations, and then to the Mall of America. And we're really looking to hit those regional employment destinations, hit areas of education, for instance, community colleges and different technical colleges and training areas, and some of the other attractions along the way. Our hours of operation, during rush hour, we run on about 10-minute headways out there, so that there's a train coming every 10 minutes, very consistent. You don't have to make sure that you hit that exact time bus, or you can get to a station, and if you miss the train the next one's going to be within 10 minutes coming to pick you up. During evening off-peak hours and stuff, the trains do reduce service, 10 to 30 minutes, but during the daytime, we're typically running at 10-minute headways. The fares are part of, similar to the fares, are the same fares as the bus system out there. And when you do buy a fare or ticket, it's transferable to the other modes within the system, whether it's BRT or bus in there. But a non-rush hour ticket is $2. Rush hour is $2.50. Those fares or tickets are good for 2.5 hours. You can buy extended tickets also. And then there are reduced fares. This is key out here for light rail. One of the benefits of it is.
Can I ask a quick question about
Go ahead.
the previous slide? Sorry about that. I was looking at the frequency data, and I was wondering if Metro Transit if that could change, like how the frequency is structured, especially with over the last year, we've seen a mass migration of the typical 9-to-5 office worker away from transit, but folks that have different work schedules, folks that work the overnight shift, work in healthcare, work other types of essential jobs, they've been the ones that have continued to ride that would utilize those off-peak hours. So is there a chance that as we get more data coming in about how the transit system is going to work in the future, that there could be like greater off-peak frequency or less of a focus on the typical rush hour times?
Yeah, and that's something that Metro Transit does do. It does review our existing service and demand out there and would determine, how best to run those. So, again, typically during rush hour, those 10-minute headways work well. During COVID, I know that we've reduced the service during that time back to, 15 or 20-minute frequencies, based on usage. But I think, that's if there is that demand out there off peak, or, if our travel, kind of we don't have so much the peaks anymore, but we're more spread out through the day, that would be evaluated to look at what the service needs are out there. So it's something they look at frequently. Yeah.
Our midday in particular, I think Nick touched on this, is that we're seeing more of, not necessarily the rush hour peaks, but more of kind of a flatter curve versus, we used to see more like that. Our overnight service is more of a challenging one, and something that Metro Transit, kind of is continuing to look at, because, we hear about the need for kind of that overnight shift work and things like that. But we tend to, our ridership in the evening has been a challenge, like late night. So that'll be something that'll, I think will be an ongoing conversation for many years.
Mm-hmm. So this slide here, again, just shows some of the environmental benefits, and it's based on, well, our trains run on electricity. So it's a good source of, can be a good source of clean energy out there, and focus on non-fossil fuels. But the graph here is showing, based on APTA data, that basically per passenger mile, we're about a third of the CO2 loading as a single occupancy vehicle. So right there, it kind of shows how it can be beneficial or more environmentally friendly, and a better source of, I guess, the demand source of power coming out of there. How does LRT operate here? Again, we operate in a dedicated guideway that runs for the LRT trains. We have some different kinds of tracks out here. In the top left-hand corner, we show running through a downtown area. Many times we use embedded tracks in those areas because of different traffic and safety through there. We also have, outside of the downtown areas, the ballasted track, or non-embedded track, it's called, where we have that what you'd be familiar with the regular railroad. That's a little bit easier track for maintenance and repair. If there's a track break or a rail break out there, it's a lot easier to repair that than in an embedded area where they'd have to go out and chip out concrete to get to the repair, fix the repair, and then fix the concrete and stuff like that. Again, we do run on electricity. The trains need to be in contact with that overhead electric line that's shown here. So those are the overhead catenary system that's in place. Some of the different kinds of running types that we have out there, center running. This is an example of University Avenue where the train runs down the center of the travel lanes of the traffic. And so that top view, you can see a three-car consist at a station along University Avenue with the travel lanes on either side of it. We have 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, and the traffic movements is. I just noticed last night that I did have this slide shows a U-turn around the tracks that we have in place. But center running seems to work the best with traffic operations because the train is running along with that predominant through movement, of traffic in the area. So when the train has a green light to go, so does the traffic going through there. So it moves through pretty quick and seems to operate very well that way. Next slide, please. Another option out there that we have in place is side running. And so side running, this is an example of Hiawatha, and I think one of the reasons that this was side running was Hiawatha Highway 55 through this area was built in place, and then the remaining right of way was left dedicated for light rail in this area. But side running is an option along our system. Next slide here. And some of the platforms that we have out there too, so these are some options if you're riding the system and going out and looking at it. The center shared platform is preferred because it's one location, one station that you're going to, no matter what direction of traffic or direction you're going on the train, you go to the one station and get there. But if there's areas where we have limited right of way and we need to work through it, for instance, here on University Avenue, we have a split platform station where those platforms, the eastbound, westbound platform are on either side of that intersection. This helps with areas of reduced right of way where we want to make sure that we get in left turns at an intersection. It is a little bit more difficult with these if we are doing maintenance and we reverse run trains, or if folks get on the wrong platform, they have to do 3 crossings of the road to get to the other station to get back to the right platform if they're not in the right place. Next slide, please. We get a lot of questions about at grade and above grade or below grade, so tunnels and bridge structures out there, and this is just kind of put into perspective of our existing system. Yes, we put in bridges, we have tunnels, where necessary. The bridges are usually to get over some structure or to work with elevation changes or major interchanges, say going over highways or extremely busy intersection areas. But for instance, we have we only have 2 stations that are not at grade out of 36 stations, existing operating stations in our system. So we do have stations that are up on bridges, but you can still reach them at grade. For instance, Franklin Avenue is one where it's on a bridge over Franklin, but it's accessible at grade on either end of those platforms. But Minneapolis Airport is one example where there was a tunnel. The train runs through a tunnel under the airport. Obviously, we don't want to run it across runways, and with the dense land use in there, the tunnel stations was the best use of space through there and the best way to get customers and riders on there. So there's a tunnel and a station, a below grade station at the airport. And then Lake Street is the only other elevated station, and Lake Street, our system there runs kind of along with Highway 55 as it comes up over on structure on Lake Street. I'm just trying to look here. What is the right of way on the University Avenue examples? And I think answer that question. I think we're about 125 or 120 feet of right of way in some of the locations that you're seeing there with the 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. Stationary. Go ahead.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
I know Dan mentioned earlier that as part of the visualizations and the renderings that would come out, they would include some at grade and above grade options.
Yeah.
Would that include for some of the areas where the right of way is constrained, a below grade option, like a shallow tunnel?
We probably wouldn't show a shallow tunnel because, well, I guess we aren't anticipating that in these locations yet, but you know, it would be below grade, so I guess it would be a cut or cross section. We are looking at grade and then looking at areas where we might have to go up on a structure at this point.
Alex, are you thinking, I mean, just where we would have areas where we would have LRT in a tunnel section and what that cross section would look like?
Yeah, particularly like thinking like the beginning part of West Broadway where the right of way is a little bit more constrained. I think, just from my personal opinion, I think it would be helpful for folks to see, you know, that what the trade-offs are. And in that location, if you did like a shallow tunnel, you could reconstruct the street, you could have wider sidewalks, you could have the turn lane, and that might be an option, understanding that the cost comes into play and all that stuff in the engineering, but like that could be an option that might be appealing to.
Sure. I think, Alex, the difference there is that obviously if you were to put LRT in a tunnel, then obviously the street back on top of LRT could be whatever you wanted it to be in the end condition. The hard part to determine, or the more difficult piece, is how much space do you need to build it in a tunnel? And so what is the construction impact from doing that, right? Because there's really two ways to build tunnels. One of them is to do a bore, you know, take a boring machine and do a direct bore through the earth underneath and therefore leave the top somewhat in place. Very expensive and usually done when it's really deep. And then the other way to build a tunnel is to open cut it, right? To just take a big, this is what's happening on Southwest along the Kenilworth corridor, dig a big trench, build a box with concrete, put LRT in that, put the road back on top of it. But how much space does that take? Does it impact the businesses on the other side? Obviously, there's no way you can keep a roadway like West Broadway open if you were to build a tunnel underneath it, because you'd need the whole space. So it's really construction impacts that are more kind of what we would want to put together in an evaluation document about what a tunnel would mean. Because the top could be whatever you wanted. It could be exactly what you had before in terms of roadway. It could be different. It could have sidewalks. It could change the parking. It would be a new roadway and sidewalk area on top.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion too. Maybe we could take a look at, you know, how we could maybe visualize that or you know, just graphically show what those impacts would be, because you know, the other thing with the tunnel is you have to get into it and out of it. So there's transition.
Where do you access?
That's pretty impactful. Yeah.
I mean, I've always been amazed where New York City subway system, there's this great big giant infrastructure under the city, and you like go, where do you go in? And there's like a sign, and you walk right down the stairs. It's like, really? That's going down there? And that's true. Whereas different spots like, you know, in Washington, D.C., you know, you come up in some of the areas on the metro and we got those great big escalators and areas that come up that take up a lot more space. So I think the key is at some point in the evaluation documentation, we'll have to talk about what the pros and cons of tunneling portions of the alignment are as well. Construction impacts, utility impacts, water, water table, all those kind of things.
Yeah. And yeah, so just kind of picking back up here, you know, taking a look at some of our station areas, and this is a rendering for the Broadway and 85th Avenue station, West Broadway and 85th up in Brooklyn Park that we put together. And what we tried to do with the project is give our stations all the same footprint. So if you go to that station, the card readers, the ticket vending machines, the shelter benches, heaters are all kind of in the same spot. So they're all going to be familiar to you, consistent throughout there. but we've tried to make them also so they're customizable. So this is fairly generic in this picture, but you know, the color schemes can change on it. The facade on the roof could change could be made to reflect more of the community surrounding it and be more individualized. But also what we do when we get into station areas is we really look at how to get customers on and off that safely, and usually our access is at an intersection. So we want to, you know, make sure that those intersections really focus on multimodal connections on the bikes, on the peds, as well as how to get cars and everybody safely through that area. So, you know, we want to make sure that coming off those station platforms, we have safe, you know, refuge areas for pedestrians going through there. So there's push buttons, they can recall that walk signal, so they can get a walk signal and get across the road, or, you know, they can, you know, cross all the way at these areas. So we really focus on pedestrian safety through this area and making sure that's key. Next slide, please.
Before you go on to the next slide, Alex had been asking what some of the cost differences might be between at grade versus below grade. So just want to make sure you saw that in before you're done.
Yeah, we can say, Alex, that it is substantial. I don't have
the from Ian. Sorry, Ian. From Ian.
Oh, Ian's asking too. I see Alex asked it also. But yeah, I do not have this. We can pull as together, just, you know, some general data of below grade, at grade, but below grade is substantial. And as Dan said, you know, you would think that, you know, initial blush, you'd think that building at grade would be more impactful, but we can get through pretty quickly. Like Dan says, if you're building a tunnel through an area, you're going to be closing down that section for a substantial amount of time to get utilities out of the way and stuff. So we'll pull that information together for you. Next slide. This is an example here of the green line at Prospect Park. This is 29th Avenue Station. You know, so we have a center station in this location. We have a lane of traffic on either side with center running through here. So this is kind of just a kind of a good visual how we fit within that space and area. Next slide. I want to just take a look at some of the context that we operate along the existing system also. So I'm gonna start in the top left corner and go clockwise through these slides. So that top left here is Central Corridor green line. It's center running in this location, and you can see that a lot of development has happened through this area. So as we were doing construction on the rail project here, Project Pride for Living Housing came in at the same time. We worked with them on their development, and they built up their multifamily housing in that location. University Avenue is University of Minnesota. Washington Avenue in this location is that top middle slide. Our photo showing us running through the transitway at the U of M, and this is an area where we looked at, you know, the University Avenue. Folks were familiar with that. Used to be a lot of traffic coming across the bridge and through here, and students crossing everywhere. And you know, I remember when I went to school here, getting across the road was a little bit of playing Frogger to try to get through with all the traffic. And so this look in the project, we mitigated the traffic there kind of as we came through, pushed the traffic or brought the traffic around the campus area, and then Washington Avenue became a dedicated transit way. So buses, trains, bikes on this area and emergency vehicles, but we took the regular vehicle traffic off this and got it around the campus and works very well. So this is an example of mitigation that we've done for traffic. Top right is Minnehaha Avenue over by the VA. This is where we have very limited right-of-way. I think about 66 feet of right-of-way in this area, and it's residential also, but we're center running and we're able to maintain a lane of traffic through this in either direction, and it seems to work very well. Going down, an example of running through downtown Minneapolis and a station in that location, fitting in tight areas. The bottom middle is Prospect Park again from the other direction, looking out at University Avenue. intersection through there. So we make that tight curve and get back on University Avenue from coming from the transitway over at the U. And then that bottom left one is a good example of University Avenue again. Through here, residential area, as you can see, how single-family houses through this area. We have a station located here and maintaining 2 lanes of traffic through it. So that's the end. That's just basic light rail, how we operate. Some examples of our existing system, just to start that discussion with folks. So, any questions?
Just a reminder too, with the agenda, Sam will cover the business impact on Central Corridor next, and we're taking up a lot of time. So if we don't get to some of the stuff at the end, we'll for sure bring it back. And if there's not enough time for questions and things like that, we'll bring stuff back.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Sam O'Connell here, and we're going to talk a little bit of where we are on our pathway forward of developing kind of that working group on anti-displacement. So I would be remiss if we did not also acknowledge that today is May 4th. So for those that celebrate Star Wars Day, may the 4th be with you, and hopefully stays with you today in a really good, positive way. So just a couple of things that Sophia talked a little bit about. We'll give you an update on where we are on the anti-displacement, and then we'll also cover a couple of slides that talk about a little bit about the Central Corridor experience. And as we got into it, we realized that we could probably spend a whole week together talking about the Central Corridor experience. So I just wanted to give our team here today an update on a couple of the things that at a very high level, and then want to explore ways that we can bring in some of the folks that actually lived through construction or had businesses on during construction as Central Corridor. The Green Line was in construction and opening, and really share that experience firsthand with the group. And we have some ideas on how that we could do. So want to just share that with you and receive some feedback. So just as to settle in a little bit, we just want to talk a little bit about the anti-displacement work, which really is sort of those 2 boxes that Sophia had up there previously. That talks about not only the creating equitable investments using light rail as part of the vehicle to do that, but then also we do not want to forget about the previous investments that were planned as part of the previous alignment too. So particularly those investments on Olson Memorial Highway that were benefiting communities in terms of safety and connectivity, and then also Golden Valley as well. So we do still feel like those are pieces that will come together. So as this topic was introduced last time, and lots of good feedback and confirmation, I think, of a pathway forward, we wanted to share this with you, not only from what we heard from the Business Advisory Committee, but the Community Advisory Committee, the cohort group, some of our policymakers, and we just want to kind of bring all of this in. So we're sharing the latest and greatest. So there was confirmed support that a third-party facilitator is needed to help us lead this work. We recognize that all of our kind of organizations as the project sponsors definitely bring definitely resources, but we also bring a little bit of baggage on this, and sometimes we're not seeing things clearly. And bringing a third-party facilitator that also is a subject matter expert in anti-displacement and gentrification issues is probably best suited to lead us through this work and conversations. Clearly, there's an interest to convene a working group as soon as possible, and that there's this acknowledgement that this isn't a side thing, that the work of the group needs to come into the project development process and is used to help inform some of our decision making, but also know that that timeline might be extended throughout the whole development of the project. So not just in the current phase that we're in as we're looking at the community supported alignment. So question here, can we clarify who makes up the advisory committee? So the advisory committee, Felicia, that we're talking about, this is the feedback from BAC members and community advisory members. Okay, Sophia, sir, can we go back and I'll get to that. Thanks for running slides today. So again, and also corridor management committee, Felicia, and some of the conversations we've had. So this is a way for us to bring all of that together and just share with you collectively. There was a request for national examples and possible shared definitions for discussion. So we did, Sophia sent that out last night in an email. If folks haven't had an opportunity to see that, I would just ask to take a look at that. We will continue to discuss and sort of how do we want to define this? There's very textbooks definitions about what is displacement. I think what we're hearing from community members is that we really need a community-centered definition of what displacement could be, because it's ultimately our businesses and ultimately our community members that are more interested in this and making sure that they are not impacted as part of the project. So we wanted to share that there was a couple of examples locally, one from the Center of Urban Regional Affairs from the University of Minnesota that talks about displacement, also from the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board as part of their comprehensive plan. So that's there for you to review. And also some work coming out of Berkeley and Austin, where Austin actually began to kind of put the displacement in different categories. So there's indirect displacement, there's the direct displacement, and then there's cultural displacement. So I think that lends us to have some really good conversations over the next couple of months about what does it really mean as we think about the blue line work here and what that could be. We also, in just high level feedback, understand anti-displacement strategies and kind of getting around it and really understanding the impacts is complicated. That doesn't mean we should be scared of it. We should step into that with good faith to know that we can work on there and that really work on some of those solutions. There are also many organizations that are doing work in this, either sort of tangentially or directly, and we want to bring that intel and knowledge into the conversation as well. And for us as the project team, as we work with Hennepin County and the Met Council, we want to make sure that we have a commitment to this, and it's going to require resources. And so part of our work is to find out exactly how we can get that jump started, how can we get that resourced as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, so just again, some feedback when we asked about who can help us with this work in terms of looking at that facilitator, but that is somebody that is also grounded in the work of anti-displacement with communities. So our technical advisory committee came up with a couple of names. The Create Toolkit, which a link, and somebody said, Sophia said she will resend that link so everybody can get into that. Trust for Public Land, Center for Economic Inclusion, very active. I think, oops. Sophia, there might be. I don't know. Jason or Sophia, are we trying to connect to that link? We'll get back into the PowerPoint here in just a second. All right. Well, as we pull that up, again, BAC, our business advisory committee members around the table, and our CAC definitely shared some names. So there you go. Thanks, Sophia. In terms of who can help in this work, making sure that we reach out. So once we do have a scope of work, we're able to share that. So the Alliance, there's obviously some efforts between the Council, Hennepin County, the Chambers, Blue Line Coalition, which we know have done a really good job of helping us identify and really quantify what anti-displacement looks like and the work that they've done, and understand that some of that work is going to be updated. And then also some good facilitators in our faith communities as well to help us with this. So just wanted to share this list with folks. If you don't see an organization or somebody that you are aware of, please let us know. Go ahead and put it in the chat or reach out to Sophia or myself, and we'll make sure we've got that. Because again, part of what we're asking now is us to make these connections as well. So when we are ready to share what that scope of work is, that we're reaching out to some of the networks that you see listed. Next slide, please. One of the questions we did get is like, where does this anti-displacement working group fit in our current structure that we have for advisory committees, and then kind of like what's sort of the role of implementing committees? So we feel, and this is probably a diagram that will go through a couple of iterations, but we feel like the anti-displacement working group is connected to all of our advisory committees, both as information share, but both as a resource. So as the anti-displacement working group comes together and begins their work, that is a very known quantity, and you're very familiar with their work and their progress and their work plan as they move forward. So that's coming to not only our technical groups, so our technical project advisory committee, some of the smaller work that we're doing in our city work, but obviously business advisory committee, community advisory committee, community works as part of Hennepin County's work on sort of the outside the rails and corridor management committee. We want everybody to be looped in. We heard from folks they want to be looped in, so we want to place this work centered in that as well. So you might see a little bit of a revised graphic on how that all comes together. Next slide. Also, what we've been hearing is a little bit of that table setting. So again, it's very important that the work of the anti-displacement group is centered in the work that all of our advisory committees is doing and receiving that information. We want this to be a good resourced group when we think about the advisory committees and the representative of the advisory committee, the working group, and that it has good representation. We also want to recognize that the advisory, the working group for anti-displacement probably can't have 60 or 70 people around it, that we definitely need to have something that's functional, and hopefully with us outlining a little bit more of that relationship with our advisory committees, we can keep it at a little bit more of a manageable size. So just, on pure logistics, folks can get together, they can spend the time together, do the work of the anti-displacement working group as well. And so we think that facilitator can also help us a little bit with that membership. And then also thoughts, if anybody also would like to provide their thoughts on subject matter expertise and facilitation experience, if there's anything else that facilitator should have or be embedded with as well. So clearly somebody that understands anti-displacement locally and also can reach out nationally, but also really can help the group get its work done as well. Pretty important. Next slide, just again, some of the names, some of the organizations folks have shared with us who should be around the table. So economic development folks working in affordable housing, our community partners, really kind of some of that research and academic piece. Obviously, organizations that will be implementing this. And again, if you have any other ideas of who should be around that virtual table, please let us know. Okay, moving forward. So we're going to continue to gather that list of organizations and key stakeholders based on our conversations, and then begin to sort of outline a little bit of that composition of the group, and that we will bring that back as well. We're in the process of gathering the definitions of anti-displacement and gentrification from other sources to help us bring into that conversation, identify some case studies, both locally and nationally, that can help us with that work. We're also drafting a request for proposals for that RFP, basically of like, what is that scope of work that we can get out pretty quickly in June that can help lead us that work. And then again, as Sophia mentioned, we have some of the work identified as our project goals, right? Minimize impacts to our community members, to our businesses, and begin to develop some of that evaluation criteria so we can address anti-displacement. Next slide. So as we develop that request for proposals, we want to bring that back out to you as a draft so you can take a look at it and really give us some good feedback on, does this seem like this is the work that needs to be done, that's in front of us? And after we receive that feedback, we'll obviously provide maybe some tweaks and then release that out to the broader community. And so that work would be out there, and we would look to you to help us communicate that that's there as well. And again, continue to talk about anti-displacement and that work as we move forward in June. So just an update. I would bring this back to the co-chairs to see if they have any thoughts or questions or anything else we should be sharing about this.
I do now.
All right, I think I'm maybe getting the green light to keep moving. We just have a few more slides, and we want to talk about light rail. So a few questions that have come up, a little bit about development and sort of what was some of our experiences with light rail. Just at a very high level, wanted to share some of this information about strong development around light rail. So in the last 17 years, permitted development, so that's kind of everything that's commercial, that's residential. There's about approximately just a little bit under $14 billion of development that has been near our high frequency transit system. So if you remember that map that Nick shared with you with our metro system, that's really kind of our high frequency transit system, plus about a little bit over a half dozen of some of our local bus service that really kind of meets that high frequency 10 to 15 minute service. So 32, what's pretty exciting is that 35% of all the regional development has occurred along transit ways. So when you look at those spines going through our region, that's really been a focus of a lot of our development. We have a lot of developers who understand that there's good connection there for their developments and being very close to transit. Previously when Hiawatha, the original blue line, was developed, there really wasn't a lot of development. Part of it was a little bit of a wait and see attitude. Let's wait and make sure that this region can actually build this line, and then development followed. Green Line, very different experiences where folks got to see, and I think a lot of what our communities are responding to, when a line is made on a map now for transit ways, developers are really seeking some opportunities there. And then Green Line extension southwest, as we look at that today, southwest, without even having an inch of light rail laid yet, has seen over $1 billion worth of investment in the corridor. And we know with the previous alignment for Blue Line extension, it was over $500 million. So folks in the development community really see that as an opportunity, and we see it both in our permitted and planned. So I just want to hit at a very high level a little bit of the Central Corridor experience, just to kind of give folks some framing. And again, we want to come back with you and talk a little bit more, because there's so much information to be sharing, both in sort of the data and the experiences. So just wanted to highlight that when we take a look at the Central Corridor, the original Green Line, so St. Paul to Minneapolis and kind of connecting through the University of Minnesota and along University Avenue, is that the projected ridership for 2030, so year 2030, was 41,000. In 2018, we were actually over that, 42,000. So wonderful, right? Like really great that we're seeing high ridership on that. That's very exciting. Lots of development, of course, as folks have been through University Avenue, you can see for sure that there's been a lot of development. The corridor has become more diverse, so we are having more communities, more diverse communities that are attracted to being near a transit service like that. So over time, we're seeing some of that diversity. The project also exceeded its goals for employing women and minorities as part of our construction contracts. So the goal for women for employment was 6%, was actually 7%. For minorities, the goal was 18%. It was just slightly over that with 19%. And contracting with our disadvantaged businesses, there was a goal of 15% through civil construction. The actual was 18%, which really translates to just under 120 million. I would say because of the success that Central was able to have this, those goals have been increased for Southwest. So for women working on the project, it's 20% now. And for our BIPOC communities, it's 32%. And the goal for contracting with DBEs is actually 16% now as a goal. And we're about 19 to 20% right now in terms of that. So Central Corridor was able to elevate those expectations about workforce and how the work actually comes back to our Minnesota businesses. Next slide, please. So talking specifically about some of the businesses that were impacted or had to live through construction, is that about 450 of those businesses made preparations to make improvements prior or during construction. So if there were businesses that were going to expand or do some improvements, some facades, they actually took that time during construction to do that. And we worked with some of those businesses so we understood what their own personal construction packs were going to be and how we can best align that and make sure we're not in their way while they were doing that. A lot of that came in through loans that were offered through different organizations or grants. And then also there was a good, strong effort in training and technical assistance that was available at the city level and at the regional level as well. Over 200 businesses were aided in about $4 million for Ready for Rail for forgivable loans, again, to kind of do some of that work and also kind of carry them through construction, because when construction had started for Central, we were just kind of getting out of that economic recovery. So there were some larger market forces going on as well. So communities were very similarly, like we are in a pandemic, struggling with some of these larger issues going on also with construction. So in terms of the overall, but there's so many stories underneath this. When we look at the green line, almost 130 street level businesses opened that fronted green line during the 4-year construction period. And those were 13 more that closed or actually relocated somewhere else, either for a business expansion, or they were looking to do something else, or took the opportunity to maybe even just, say that this is not what they wanted to do anymore. So we can dig a little bit more into that as well. So overall, good news, but again, there's many stories behind that, and we want to bring that conversation. So as we look to do some next steps, we'd like to work with the chairs to bring in some of that local stakeholders to share their perspectives and answer the questions. We don't have all of the stories as staff, and we want to bring that in. So we have some business owners that we would like to have come in and share with you, some residents, definitely some organizers. Organizers were a critical piece in here in addressing affordable housing and making sure that businesses were supported throughout construction and into opening, and also policymakers, because a lot of that required resources. And how do you get those resources to the table? And we're hearing from, obviously, our communities with Blue Line, how do we get that early on? So just a very high level, but just our commitment to you is that we want to dig a little deeper and share these experiences with you as that. So with that, I will turn this back over to the co-chairs for any thoughts or next steps.
I don't have any comments or updates.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Sophia, obviously we're out of time. We've got about 2 minutes left. Do you want to do any sort of wrap up here or let us know what you're going to carry over to the next meeting, please?
Yeah, I think the committee had asked for a little bit of conversation about what the corridor management committee is and who's on it. Obviously, we run out of time for that, so we can carry that item over to the next agenda just to talk about who's on it. It's part of state statute. Just kind of give that background of that, and as well as our roster. I will offer that if folks are still curious and don't want to wait till the next meeting, we do, if you go to our website and go to the corridor management committee, it does have the full roster as well as a description of what that advisory committee is. So just want to offer that. We'll pull that forward. And just real quickly, sorry, I'm getting some feedback. I hope people can't hear that. I'll just keep talking. Our next meeting is the first Tuesday of June at our normal time, but also just want to throw out for people's calendars right now that if we met in July at our scheduled date, it would be basically right when everybody's getting back from the holiday and just kind of maybe recognizing that people are maybe taking that week off or that will have been off. We want folks to think and look at their calendars about pushing our July meeting back a week, so that we hopefully have more participation. So I'm seeing some head nods to that. We can revisit that as well in June. Just give the thumbs up so then I can push that calendar appointment. But please, if it works for now, just kind of hold that date. Unless people are already comfortable, I can move the appointment now. But I don't know if there's any reactions to that.
It seems there's a consensus of head nodding, so I would say yes. Felicia,
Okay.
And Tim, you good with that?
Yes, I'm good with that.
Cool. Okay, I will basically, we'll check in with all of our committees, but then move that appointment so everybody has, I believe it's the 13th, Tuesday the 13th on their calendars for July. Just want to give people that time because calendars get booked up fast. And yes, I'll update the calendars with a new invitation for that date. And I think we kind of highlighted some of the topics for June, and bring some of that forward and obviously continue some of these conversations. I know this meeting was very presentation heavy. We were sharing a lot of information. I think our agenda will be a little bit more pared back. We'll focus on some of the visualizations and just really get into more of the discussion around them at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's 9:30. Thanks for staying on time. Nick, Sophia. See you at our next meeting then. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Take